Hi, this is Kara. Welcome to Breaking Free Fridays, or welcome back if you've been following the series. I'm glad to have you here, and I'm looking forward to talking today about the cost of unresolved trauma. This is a big one because based on my experience, my journey, my research, which has been extensive, I truly believe that the majority of humans have some degree of unresolved trauma. I think it's something that we have experienced through ancestral lineage, generations and generations, that we experience not only in what has been passed down in patterns of behavior in families and also societal patterns and things that have happened on a not only a micro but a macro level, our own personal experiences, which of course are significant in this process too. But I want to go back to something, you may have seen the other video, but I talked a little bit about just the way that our brains are wired, and our primal brain, and just instinctually speaking, really wired for seeking and watching out for danger. And so our systems, without us really training them, they tend to operate more in that fight or flight state, even though we live in a world where, by the most part, there are a lot of aspects that are safe, but things can feel very threatening, and there can be very threatening experiences as well. So there's that facet as well. And one of the things that I wanted to bring to the surface is that oftentimes there's just so much freedom that comes from awareness. And for me, I didn't become aware that I even had experienced trauma until I was about 40, and it was definitely eye-opening. It gave me another level to go in terms of my self-development and awareness and healing, and just having that understanding was a huge jumping off point. So I wanted to share just in general kind of that baseline, and just that it's almost just part of the human experience, really, and our big opportunity for awakening to a new level of opportunity and mastery in how we show up and how we regulate our emotions and our nervous system. So I want you to realize that there's a lot of hope and a lot of opportunity here too. So one of the things that I wanted to go into is what does it look like, unresolved trauma? How can you tell? Like, what are the symptoms? A lot of times you might hear of things like, trouble with sleeping, or confusion, or, being easily startled. There can be ease of frustration, or muscle armoring, that's like intense tightness in your muscles, if you will. There can be various symptoms like nausea even, or some of the other things that can show up as in terms of unresolved trauma. There are often coping mechanisms that people have, and some of what you could identify that would be connected to trauma are things like, and I'm not saying this is always connected to trauma, but often is the case, continual bouts of depression, or even ADD, or another aspect would be addiction, substance abuse. There's also perfectionism, OCD, coping mechanisms where a person is trying to survive the pain of things that or that they've experienced that resonate in their systems as trauma. And remember, not every person experiences trauma in the same way, and one event or circumstance or experience that may be traumatic to one individual may not be to another. So it's really important to not be comparing and to not try to minimize your experience, and try to say things like, oh, well, somebody else is so much worse off, because our own individual experience of things that may have been traumatizing, it's important to honor that and be with that. When we minimize things or judge things, it's not really helpful for the healing process. So keep that in mind. And another thing to be aware of is, I wanted to just mention a couple of things that are also indicators of unresolved trauma. So when you're in a relationship with another person, it could be any relationship really, or a circumstance or an event. If you find that you are reacting as opposed to being able to be responsive, the difference being in a responsive state, you're really thinking through how you're engaging. There's conscious behavior going into an interaction, whereas with reaction, it's just like boom. It's almost like it's immediate, and it's just coming from an automatic place, basically. It doesn't feel like you have a lot of authority over kind of shaping how your interaction might be. Another way to tell is if something that is going on, if your reaction to it or sense of it, let's use that word instead, if your experience of it is such that you are really charged, and you can even tell, like you might be experiencing something like it's a mountain, and it would be something that you could even see is, well, this is a small thing. Why am I getting so upset? Why am I so charged about this? Sometimes we can identify that ourselves. Sometimes that's also a way that we can tell that there's unresolved trauma, is that maybe our loved ones can see that we are really heightened about something, and it wouldn't normally be such a source of upset. And that's coming from people that are very compassionate, that have empathy, not ones that are just like don't feel, shut down, but they recognize the value of feeling. So if there's just such a charge, that's another indicator. Another thing that you can tell that unresolved trauma is floating about is if you keep ruminating on something. Let's say something happened. You had an interaction that was upsetting, or an event or a circumstance, and you just you're continually going over it in your mind, trying to figure out what happened, why, what is going on here? This doesn't make sense. This wasn't fair. There's just this constant ruminating basically about something with no peace or ease. It just feels like you're spinning and spinning, and you may even be doing this from a place of intending for resolution, intending for release, intending for healing, intending for something to move into a better place. And if you find yourself just spiraling, that's an indication of some unresolved trauma or deeper wounds that are there. Those are some, I would like to call those more on the mild end of unresolved trauma indicators, because then you go into some of the areas, and I touched on this a little bit earlier, where there's these really intense coping mechanisms that become patterns, and even sometimes things that we might describe as personality traits, but really it's coping mechanisms, patterns of behavior, rooted in trying to survive. And so those can turn into things like substance abuse, addiction, perfectionism, workaholism, martyr complex. That's another one. Extreme forms of judgment. If it's difficult to really look at others or situations through compassionate lenses or empathetic eyes, and it's easier to just come from a place of judgment, oftentimes that's a reflection of our own self-judgment or something inside that may be an unresolved trauma or wound that has an opportunity to heal. And then you go to the other extreme and of indicators. And some of those are in the forms of things like real problems with sleeping, for example, or another thing can be flashbacks. And those are really difficult because people end up experiencing something awful that has happened as though it's happening in this current moment. And they might be trying to fight it in a way that they couldn't at the time, but it can be very intense, and those are real indicators of unresolved trauma. Another thing can be if somebody just shuts down. You might be in an interaction, conversation, or an event might happen, and if somebody just is not responding, oftentimes it's not because they're wanting to ignore. They literally could be in a place where they're kind of hijacked in a shutdown. Another version, I like to call these trauma episodes, and they can present themselves in any number of ways. And often as a person heals, the ways that these present themselves can change, or the type of trigger can impact how these show up. But an example could be where you get triggered and all of a sudden you are just trembling and shaking, and you can't speak, or your legs are stuck and feel like they're paralyzed, and you can't get up, you can't move, or you might start just crying uncontrollably, and all of these other things are happening at the same time. It could be a combination of these symptoms that are happening. And in my experience, these kind of trauma episodes can happen and last for anywhere from a few minutes to an hour or more. And your body will move through it, but in the meantime it can be debilitating, and it can really feel like it's hijacking you. So I wanted to just encourage you to find the courage to awaken and to embrace the healing journey, and to navigate through those unresolved traumas and wounds, because the beauty and the magic and the opportunity and the potential from breaking through and breaking free onto the other side, that's where the gold is. It's all about just realizing your best life and your best potential. And those unresolved traumas, they just can keep you from getting there. And so for purposes of just making this video more digestible in length, but also it's kind of a heavy topic, I'm not going to go into all of the tools and techniques, but I just want to let you know that there are lots of options, and there is hope. There is hope for healing. There are tools, there are techniques, there are ways of navigating this, and there is opportunity to break free. And I just want you to know that you're not alone. And I honor you. I honor your journey. I honor your courage. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. And if so, I encourage you to subscribe or send a like. And any comments that you have, I would love to hear them, and even hear more about what you might like to know or hear about. So thank you for listening, and here's to another level of empowerment and breaking free. And I hope you have a wonderful week. Thanks. Bye.